Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Let the filibustering begin.
Welcome to Nerd Party.
Hello and welcome to Filibuster here on the Nerd Party. On today's show, to quote Light Camera Jackson himself, Doctor, give me the news. We've got a bad case of Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. I'm Dallas King, and with me as always is the Wong to my Strange, which is actually a great compliment because he's no longer sidekick but now Sorcerer Supreme on a technicality. It's Lee Hutchison. How are you?
I think that's the first time we've ever mentioned the living legend that is Light Camera Jackson. I love that guy. I can't help but admire his gimmick, his work tenacity, and I must admit, his recommendation of Whirlybird as one of the top 10 films of last year, pretty good film. It popped up on Mubi USA, and I enjoyed it. So I tip my glass to a fellow film reviewer.
Hopefully, maybe one day he'll have some extreme views on an A24 film and we can get him onto the project to talk about it. So, as you may have guessed, sadly, Lee and I are not in Cannes this week. Although, lately, you were in London for the last week, but sadly, we're not at Cannes. So, we're going to catch up and talk about the Multiverse film, which came out this week. No, not that one. The other one, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. Doctor Strange teams up with the mysterious America Chavez, a teenage girl who can travel across the multiverse to battle multiple threats, including the alternative versions of himself, which threaten the very fabric of reality itself. Along the way, he seeks help from Wanda Maximoff, aka Scarlet Witch, Wong, and many, many others. Written by Michael Waldron, who also wrote the Loki series, and directed by Sam Raimi. It stars Benedict Cumberbatch, Elizabeth Olsen, Chiwetel Ejiofor, Benedict Wong, Conchita Gomez, Rachel McAdams, and the man with the greatest agent in the world, with Michael Stolberg. It's Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. So, Lee, big question, obviously, how good is Michael Stolberg's agent?
It was pretty impressive. I mean, there's immediately things go through your head where you're like, oh, he appears at the beginning. He's like a pretty well-known actor. He's got independent film credibility, so clearly they've got to get him into this sort of MCU verse. And you're like, oh, I wonder when he's going to come back up again. Or you start to doubt yourself. You're like going, ooh, there's a bit of bitterness and animosity in here. Did I miss him in one of the other TV shows or one of the other movies? And then you sort of start to think, is he going to be in future films or something like that? Because surely he's not just a one scene and done. It's a very bizarre moment.
Yeah, no, if you, to be fair, if you can get Michael Stolberg into your film for one scene, you might as well. He stole the entirety of Call Me By Your Name with his wonderful monologue at the end of that. He obviously was in a few more scenes than that, but that's the one scene that everyone remembers. Despite him being a fantastic actor, his appearance in the first Doctor Strange film so many years ago was kind of forgettable. He didn't really have much to do, so the fact that he was on the poster with credit, it suggested like there was going to be big things, and he was able to showcase his disdain for Stephen Strange in one particular scene. Yeah, he was able to talk about the fact that his cats died during the blip. But then he disappears. No, sorry, spoilers, but yeah, he doesn't come back. It makes me wonder, was something potentially lost in reshoots? It felt like it was building up that there was going to be a different version of him in a multiverse somewhere where, something happened and it just never really materialized. But, all credit to the agent for getting him along and getting him that wonderful credit there. So, Lee, I naturally now lost count of how many MCU films there are. We're in the mid to late 20s now. What were your expectations going into this one? Were you looking forward to it? Continuing the multiverse theme that has been teased and essentially kickstarted in a variety of Marvel projects, including WandaVision, Loki, No Way Home, etc., etc., etc. What were you hoping for and expecting going into this?
I'm not too sure, to be honest. I've found myself. I think, are we in phase 4 at the moment?
We are in phase 4, yes, the Ant phase. So, that's a Edgar Wright joke. He loves phase 4, which is a horror movie about ants. So I'm assuming Ant-Man will be the big bad in this one. So
Yeah, I wasn't overly excited for it. I've seemed to have struggled to kind of get going with this kind of latest phase of the movies. That sort of post Avengers Endgame slump kind of probably applies to me. Like I was quite invested in that sort of period. Not to the expense of like I was obsessed or anything, but I was really interested in it. And with these films that have kind of come out so far, they've been kind of very middling by and large. And with this, I didn't have strong opinions on the first Doctor Strange movie, but I like Cumberbatch, I like Elizabeth Olsen, I like Sam Raimi, so I was relatively keen to check it out, and I think more so, I think I was keen to see it as soon as possible to avoid kind of spoilers as well. So that felt like my main motivation behind it, but I think I've said it for a while now with these Marvel movies. They kind of feel like a bit of an obligation at this point. Like I'm going along to see them because like I should go see them. I've seen all the other ones. There's not much of an enthusiasm behind it, truth be told.
yeah, no, I mean this one was in a tricky spot because this is the first sequel to Doctor Strange, but it's actually been a long time since we had the first Doctor Strange movie, and he has popped up in pivotal roles in Avengers Infinity War, Avengers Endgame, and sort of Spider-Man No Way Home, essentially taking over the bearded, goateed father figure for Peter Parker at one point. It sort of sets him up as like the new sort of Iron Man, the sort of leader of all the other sort of superpower beings in this particular universe, the 616 universe. But yeah, I don't think people were really excited, and I think this is. I mean, we'll get onto it in a bit. It's the problem is that people weren't really excited for a Doctor Strange movie. They seem to be excited for the Multiverse movie, and I guess I've got to come to you on this one. You saw Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness before Everything Everywhere All at Once, whereas I saw them the other way around. And, you had a lot of praise for it in the A24 Project episode. But I mean, I guess being untainted by that second film, I mean, what were your views on their use of the multiverse in this movie?
Yeah, it's one of those things. Like for me, I feel like Multiverse. I was actually speaking about it with former podcast guest we've had on the show, Carlos Miranda, last night. We were watching we were just like sitting there just watching some Star Trek last night. We watched this kind of like parallel universe style episode, and we were like, how is like parallel universe has been rebranded into multiverses? And it's been weird to see sort of that rebranding aspect of it, and it's become this kind of vogue word. And I always think the best sci-fi uses the idea of kind of multiverses and parallel universes to shine a light on like that road not taken, or kind of alternative viewpoints about where our stories, our characters' lives could have gone. And I find that's an interesting kind of way to do that, to be exposed to things like that. But with Marvel in particular, you see it where they go, we want to make a multiverse movie, and when you think of that, you think, okay, they want to get all the Spider-Men in, and then with this, they maybe want to get other characters in, maybe they want to get the X-Men in, for example. You just sort of think of multiverse as like code for like, we really want to sort of bridge these gap between like Sony worlds and what were previously Fox movies, and bring in other cameos, etc. And it's not like you go in, oh, they're going to do it to shine a light on our characters and go from there, which I think is just the the worst way to approach something like this.
Yeah, I've just looked up the definition between multiverse and parallel universe. Multiverse is the name for all the parallel universes within the multiverse. So I guess if they were looking at one particular instinct of a parallel universe, which I guess is what the Marvel were doing with the What If TV series, which actually I have to admit I never actually watched. There was just too much on at that time. So, an individual episode looking at one particular offshoot of the Marvel Universe, that would be a parallel universe, whereas the multiverse is an excuse to mix and match from every single possible one that you could do, which I believe you are completely correct in your cynical takedown of Marvel, in that it's basically an excuse to try and get all the remaining franchises, which are owned by different companies, into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. As I said on the project, when discussing No Way Home, I believe that was a film which did it in the correct way, in that they brought in different versions of Peter Parker and Spider-Man in order for the character played by Tom Holland in this one, in order for him to grow and evolve as a character. Here, the multiverse is being used essentially as a crux for the big bad. It's used as a MacGuffin, a Deus Ex Machina, and whatever, to, let's do some cool things and meet some new different characters. Let's do something cool visually, etc., etc. Although, having seen what Everything Everywhere All at Once could do in terms of creativity, with a budget of 25 million compared to what this does, which I think, as someone pointed out, look, it's just the same version of New York, but there's flowers. Doctor Strange looks pretty much exactly the same as all the other versions of Doctor Strange. There just didn't seem to be enough creativity. There was one particular scene where they first go through several multiverses, which showed you what they could have done, but then just decided to set it in a slightly different version of New York. And I think that was one of the disappointing things, is that they could have done so much more visually with it. But I think the problem was that the way that it was done, it was basically used to bring in lots of expensive looking CGI fights and stuff, whereas I don't think we really gained much in terms of character development for Doctor Strange. He seemed a bit more at peace and more willing to help people, but I mean, he technically helped Peter Parker in the previous film, even though that didn't go all according to plan. I mean, we're going to go into spoilers with this. It's a Marvel film. It's been out for a couple of weeks, I think it's fair to say. Despite their, I'm not even going to say best attempts with the marketing to maybe throw us off the scent, it did turn out that the big bad of the film was indeed Wanda Maximoff, aka Scarlet Witch. Some people have said that this has totally retconned the wonderful TV series WandaVision, which saw her dealing with her grief of losing vision. But at the end of that, essentially, she, in order to overcome that, she then lost her two fake children that she'd created with the power of her mind in a New Jersey city, and taking control of the minds of everyone in that city. She was not a hero at that point, and I don't think you really could have called her a hero by the end of the film. And then she had essentially like Evil Dead's Book of the Dead at the end to try and make contact with her children in another world. But I mean, what did you make of this character arc for Wanda, which saw her basically not fully embrace her villainous, because she's one of those classic Marvel villains that what she is doing to her seems like the correct path and is totally reasonable, but obviously she is causing pain and destruction to others. I mean, what did you make of her arc in this?
Yeah, I was a bit confused about it, truth be told, because when I watched WandaVision all the way back at the beginning of the first lockdown, I was like, by the end of that show, she kind of accepted that she was at fault. Perhaps she'd gone a little bit too far, and she was kind of ready to move on with her life. And I think I said the same to a friend, and they were like, "Oh yeah, but remember, like in the post-credit sequence, she gets like enveloped by this dark magic thing." And I was like, I remember her sort of like being up in like a corner, but I don't remember like how that necessarily happened. And it feels like, I know that these kind of post-credit sequence things can be like a big jumping off point, but I felt that it was like a criminally underdeveloped point, and it just kind of, as you say, retconned an entire sort of mini series to an extent. And I just kind of was watching that the whole time going, I don't really buy this. And I kept thinking, like, she could adopt some kids if she wanted. Like,
why didn't she just make some more?
Didn't even quite understand the logic behind it, where like in the WandaVision, like she makes this like fake fantasy world, and then she sees another world where, like, another multiverse where like she has kids, and then she wants to go get those kids. But it just feels like that's a huge leap to to take these kids from another mom. There's a kernel of a really interesting idea there, but it just doesn't kind of match up with what we see on the screen, and it feels like it's just too big a leap to ask the audience to believe that. I can imagine maybe on a smaller scale of a movie, perhaps like someone being driven to do something pretty crazy and mad like this. We've seen like some really interesting kind of indie films over the years that have kind of dealt with things like that. But with this, it's just like, so she would destroy, chunks of New York. She would try and run down this young woman. And I know they kind of build in that she's been taken over by this dark thing, but it just disconnects from this character that we knew previously. And yeah, it just kind of left a sour taste in my mouth, really.
Yeah, no, because I mean, there are a lot of holes in Wanda's theory about doing this. She wants to get kids back, but as you say, if she does do that and takes them back to her universe, then she will be essentially depriving another version of herself from her kids, and then God knows what that Wanda will then do to get their kids back. It's not really, but then she is, I guess, a grieving mother. Even though the kids never existed before. About 2 months before she does this. But yeah, no, it does basically allow her to go sort of full big bad and unleash, her powers and stuff like this in some very sort of entertaining ways. She says, I'm trying to be reasonable, and where she basically destroys Camertage, and then we find out what being unreasonable is, which is basically by mind melding with another version of herself, which is kind of where things get really sort of interesting and I guess go full Raimi. I mean, what did you make of the addition of Sam Raimi to this? I mean, it was going to be Scott Derrickson apparently originally, the director of the original one and director of Sinister and stuff like that. When it was announced that he was coming back to do this, they did talk about this being Marvel's first horror film, but he left for the age-old creative differences. Sam Raimi was brought in, obviously very famous for creating the Spider-Man trilogy, and probably the most Raimi superhero horror sequence that we got in Spider-Man 2, where the Doc Ock's tentacles trash a operating room. I mean, were you excited to have Sam Raimi back in the superhero world and taking on a Marvel project?
I like Sam Raimi, and he's, of all his films, the one that I think, and I've seen it seem to be getting a lot of people watching it for the first time or revisiting it recently, was like Drag Me to Hell,
Yes.
which has one of the most horrible endings. And there's times I honestly genuinely think about that character where I'm like, oh, what a shame. She's like burning in hell for all eternity. Just like it'll wash over me while I'm sending an email or maybe out for a run going, God, that was really cruel. But yeah, I think people kind of speak about like, oh, like Sam Raimi is all over this film. I think that's fair to an extent. I think in some of the more intimate moments, you can kind of see his visual direction and him perhaps pushing the kind of Marvel envelope, within a reason to an extent. But overall, I feel like when I think of his, in particular the Spider-Man movies and going all the way back to Evil Dead, whatever kind of special effects were always augmented by kind of a lot of practical locations and so on. And I know obviously this film was heavily impacted with COVID like Spider-Man, but it just ends up looking quite visually boring. Like it's not necessarily on locations or practical areas. It's like it's on green screens and kind of augmented sort of buildings and stuff, and it just kind of takes you out. You're like, I want to see a Sam Raimi Doctor Strange kind of kicking around a bit in a realer world than that. Like it's just got that kind of really poor cinematography that I think we associate with kind of Spider-Man No Way Home, where it's just quite, you feel like there's an annoying filter over it and it's quite grey and dreary at points. And yeah, I just felt like a lot of the stuff sort of undermined Sam Raimi being able to kind of break out of the box.
Yeah, I think people said, this was, this is, this is a Sam Raimi film. I mean, there are sequences that are clearly a Sam Raimi film. I'm thinking of the first sort of possession sequence in Wanda's house, which is very sort of Evil Dead sort of things creaking, lots of whip pans, stuff like that. There's the tunnel chase following the Illuminati sequence, which is something out of a horror film. And then probably as well, definitely a Sam Raimi one would be the musical fight between the two Doctor Stranges with all the music notes, where Elfman gets to flex his creative muscles on that one. Beyond that, I think it falls very much in line with the standard sort of Marvel. This is what we need you to do, and this is the style in which you're going to do it, which is basically in a giant room with a green screen and all that sort of stuff. So, I mean, he does, when he's allowed to, he does make his stamp on it, but not enough that I think you could rave about it and call it, a Sam Raimi masterpiece and stuff like that. Oh, obviously, there is another sequence where we get a cameo from the one and the only Bruce Campbell. I'm intrigued to know, in your screening, was there a bigger cheer for Bruce Campbell or were there bigger cheers for the Illuminati?
I think there was more. There was a bigger cheer for a certain member of the Illuminati over another one, but there was a good response to Bruce Campbell, and and certainly one of the post credit sequences involving him too.
Yeah, no, I mean, my audience, there was definitely some fans in there who were Sam Raimi fans as opposed to Marvel fans, because there was definitely some people who had no idea who he was, but there were some people who definitely knew who he was. And I've seen some complaints about the second post credit sting. And I think it sort of dives into the main problem with the Marvel movies for me at the moment, where I'm almost to the point of checking out, which is blasphemous to say, and controversial, and probably not something where I thought I would be, when I first started enjoying the Marvel movies in 2008. But it's just the first post-credit scene, which introduces Claire, played by Charlize Theron. Well done for keeping that completely secret, good on them. But, that first scene undermines basically the very last second of the film of the Doctor Strange, where he gets his third eye. What does that mean? And then he's suddenly just happy wearing a scarf and going around with his third eye in the next bit. It's like, okay, what happened with that? Nobody knows. And then, so that, it used to be that the first post-credits thing would advance the next film, fair enough. And then the second one would always be a funny moment. And you get, Bruce Campbell finally having the curse wear off and he stops hitting himself, allowing for that wonderful sort of Three Stooges style physical comedy. But people were upset that it didn't provide another cameo or something else. And it was like, really? Is this what we've got to, where essentially all Marvel movies are? And the thing that people discuss most about a Marvel movie is the cameos or what it means for the next Marvel movie. They don't seem to care actually what happens in this one. It's all about the next one. No one, I've not seen anyone come out of this film and say, oh wow, wasn't that a great character arc for Doctor Strange, or wasn't it cool when this happened? It was all about, oh, what do the cameos mean? Are we going to get the X-Men in it? Are we going to get Fantastic Four? Blah 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 blah. And it's just really exhausting. It's like they're basically, each film is basically almost like a commercial for the next film, and it's like, what's the point going on? We're reaching saturation level for these things, and it's like, if you don't have cameos, then people get upset that there's no cameos in it. It's like, you just can't win anymore. I mean, am I alone in my frustration with this, or?
No, you're spot on, and so on. I mean, I enjoy these films in isolation, but I think this has been something.
But can you enjoy them in isolation? Can you do it now?
I think I can, but for some people they clearly can't, and there's probably almost like junkies to an extent. It's always about the next hit.
We've given you 20 films for free, but now you've really got to start watching everything, and every TV series, every post cameo, every post credit scene, if you want to truly understand what's going on with these films.
And I think what kind of it's probably almost similar to being a kind of football fanatic or something like that. That you watch your game, you win it, your cheers, you're ecstatic, and within about 3 seconds of it being over, you're like, oh my god, right, the next game, and oh, if this happens, and oh, if we've won that one, but of course we're going to lose, the next one's this. It's like you just can't be present in the moment. It's just this cyclical kind of cycle, which is just emotionally draining. And I think for Marvel, I think it's always been like that to an extent since a couple of movies in, and it became kind of clear their sort of, how they structure these things. But I think the reality is it's been a lot worse since kind of it's been a good few years now since Disney obviously bought Fox, and like we all know one of the huge reasons they wanted to do that was to bring in characters from like X-Men, Fantastic Four, and perhaps some other things that were sold off. And it's always been in that moment of like, oh, are these characters going to appear? Almost I think one movie into probably having that purchase made, like, right, these characters are going to appear, or then the other ones were like, okay, so that's the Avengers done, right, clearly the X-Men are going to be next, and everyone just keeps expecting them to appear in other movies. And credit to Marvel to an extent, they've kept their powder dry when it probably would have been easy to just like ram a lot of these characters in, throw things up in the air. They clearly are working to a plan, and there is some kind of self-containment and respect about that, which is good. But it's the fans more that are the problem.
It's the age-old problem that the fans can demand everything that they want, but the problem is that even if it's delivered, it probably will not live up to their expectations. And I guess a prime example of that is the Illuminati, the big cameo scene, essentially, that was spoiled online in advance, even by, I think, some of the Marvel accounts showed a couple of scenes. There was rumors that were going around where we're going to get Tom Cruise as a superior Iron Man, all these sort of things. Obviously Patrick Stewart's Charles Xavier was kind of, his voice was featured, and partial bit of his head was featured in I think the second trailer. But then everyone was wondering which version. He's got a yellow wheelchair, which is the same wheelchair that's in the animated series from 1992. So which version of Charles Xavier were we going to get? And obviously, we got, I guess, a fulfillment of fan casting in some aspect of it, in that John Krasinski was cast as Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic in this, which has been going around ever since, I think a rumour came out that Emily Blunt was going to be cast as Sue Storm, or she kept getting asked about Marvel movies. She said, well, no, I don't really want to do it. And then everyone kept fan casting John Krasinski and Emily Blunt because they're married as Reed Richards and Sue Storm. And then, so we did get him in this, and we got Anson Mount back as Black Bolt from the much maligned and largely forgotten TV series Inhumans. We got Maria Rambeau as an alternate version of Captain Marvel. And then we got Chiwetel Ejiofor as a different version of Mordo. I mean, what did you make when you first saw the? Oh yeah, of course, there was Peggy Carter as Captain Carter from the What If TV series as well. What did you make when you saw the lineup? Did it meet your expectations, or were you expecting a different lineup?
I'll be honest, I didn't really even give it much thought and so on. Like, again, they're kind of movies that I look forward to, and I'm like, oh, like, there'll be a selection of cameos, and I think a few of them, obviously, we knew Xavier was going to be there, and I think Peggy Carter, I think she featured a little bit in the poster as well, which I kind of saw. But I didn't expect the guy from was it the
Inhumans,
that Marvel show, the Inhumans, yeah, like that. For me, obviously, as a Star Trek fan, which is obvious to everyone, that was the first time like two Star Trek captains had been on the screen, and the first time in a Marvel movie, Patrick Stewart and
there's a real multiverse crossover that he wants to see.
So yeah, that was my little moment there, because I was sitting there thinking, like, who the hell's this guy? Like, I probably like nearly everyone did not know about Inhumans, and when I saw his name at the end, I was like, what's Anson Mount doing in this? Oh, fair enough. And I think one of the obviously the big one, and I think it's been out long enough, like the Reed Richards one, it was kind of like, oh, that was really obvious casting, wasn't it? It's just he's not my Reed Richards, but there was just, I just wasn't very excited.
You're a Griffith fan then.
Yeah, he's pretty good. It just felt like I watched it and I was like, oh, that's not that exciting, is it? It's just kind of like, yeah, that's fan casting brought to life. It didn't feel like, when you think of some of the other characters and actors, no one really expected them or pigeonholed them, and with that you're like, oh, he's kind of I like him, but he's not the most exciting talent.
Yeah, is he the smartest man alive? Have you seen that video?
No.
That did amuse me. The proof that none of these movies are ever filmed with everyone in the same place, where Elizabeth Olsen, under an actual lie detector, truthfully said that she had never met John Krasinski before, and the woman who was interviewing him was like, "But he's in the same movie as you," and she's like, "I've never met him," and the guy's like, "No, she's telling the truth," and it's like, yeah, so who knows who she thought she was acting against? It also kind of suggests that Elizabeth Olsen never watched Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness either, but fair play to her, But I mean, the Reed Richards one, to me, that felt like almost like Kevin Feige and the MCU were testing the water to see what the reaction was from fans to him in the role, and then they can go forward with him in a full movie. Or if the reaction was a bit tepid, then they could always say, "Oh well, that was just this particular universe's version of Reed Richards," and they can cast someone else in it. Who knows? It might be a one and done deal for him. He might be in it more, but what I did appreciate about this cameo-laden scene, which added really nothing to it apart from giving cheap pops to a bunch of Marvel fans, was then how quickly it was all taken away to basically prove what I have known for a long time, basically ever since Avengers Endgame, is that Wanda Maximoff is indeed the strongest Avenger, where she basically single-handedly dispatches everyone, causing Black Bolt's head to explode, turns Mr. Fantastic into a cheese string, and not even snaps Charles Xavier's neck. There's a slow-motion version of it on Twitter I saw, where she rips his head in two. Potentially why the film got a PG-13, but it's a kind of blink and you'll miss it moment. But what did you make of her dispatching everyone in what could have been potentially gruesome fashion, because someone gets cut in half by their own shield as well, but it's all kind of done in a Marvel-friendly way.
Yeah, it was interesting. I'm the same as you. She's clearly this incredibly powerful character and individual.
Could have easily defeated Thanos single-handedly, in my eyes.
I think so, yeah. And the problem I had with it was like she essentially is just like killing off this cannon fodder. Like the people she kills are just like cameos of characters that we maybe have like attachment to from other movies, but aren't really those people. So it's just kind of like this murder spree, and it's kind of like, oh, they've just been brought in to just be essentially kind of killed off, and there wasn't perhaps that death where you're like, oh, it's really.
No one ever really dies in the Marvel universe, do they? Apart from Yondu in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. James Gunn has said he will never ever come back, but pretty much they've shown with Loki and everyone else. Well, I guess we'll have to see what they have if Tony Stark ever comes back. He's about the only other one at the moment, of course. But yeah, no, it's like, yeah, there's no real stakes involved with any of these deaths, really, is there?
No, there's not, and it's just when they get killed off, they're like, oh, okay, fair enough. Whereas like there needed to be that moment where it was like, oh, her behavior, we're constantly told she's crossed the line, and we do see that, but there's not a moment that kind of like the gravity of a situation that she's gone too far, perhaps killed off a meaningful character in the universe that we've been following.
Yeah, no, I mean it's also difficult when you've got a clear section of the audience who are Wanda fans and are in fact essentially cheering her on. It does make it quite difficult. Because it sort of gets to the end, and an interesting fact. I mean, I'm guessing I don't think you've rewatched the post-credits scene of WandaVision recently. Then, but she does hear at the end of that "Help, Mommy" from her two kids, and apparently that is essentially the scene at the end where she ends up terrorizing her own children by coming into this universe and trying to take them away. So it's actually, she's hearing her, essentially the actions of herself, which she thinks is her children calling for help, and that's why she's trying to get to them. But it turns out it was her all along. The calls were coming from inside the house. So I guess maybe a self-fulfilling prophecy, which is why she decides to take it all down and destroy her Scarlet Witch temple. Although, again, don't see a body. She's buried under rubble. She's clearly the strongest Avenger. She'll be back in some form or another, I'm completely sure of. What did you make of Wanda's end at the film?
I had to kind of take a second and go, oh, they have potentially killed her in this situation again. Like, there's some deaths that really pack a punch in this, whereas this kind of felt like, it lacked that little bit of a moment to kind of elevate it. It just felt like something that happened in an accumulation of the plot. It didn't feel like, this is someone that we've been following for, what, maybe 6 years now, give or take 5 years. I can't remember how long ago that came out, maybe 6. So it felt like she deserved a bigger moment, whether she was on the good side, the bad side, than sort of what she got and so on. It just, you invest a lot of time into these characters, and that's just Marvel themselves. And if you're not going to make it something kind of like a moment, then it just kind of feels like a little bit for nothing. You want to leave them on a moment where you're like, wow, what a journey that was, or what a moment that was. Like, you always forget, no one's talking about that as like one of these big powerful moments the way it perhaps should have been.
Yeah, no, I mean, Tony Stark's sacrifice at the end of Endgame, perhaps, something like that, something with a bit more emotional weight. I don't think she was given the chance to really sort of get that moment. Although, having said that, I'm all down if Elizabeth Olsen ever wants to work with Sam Raimi on a full-blown horror film in the future. I think she would do great in that kind of role, and I would love to see that. But in terms of where we see Doctor Strange go next, obviously apparently he's caused an incursion. How that, of course, differs to the work of the TVA and variants and stuff like that in terms of the Loki series, which they introduced with that, I'm not entirely sure. It wasn't really explained. Are you looking forward to more adventures from Doctor Strange, teaming up with Charlize Theron to go do some stuff, or is it all just getting a bit much now?
It's all a bit much, really, but I'll be there opening weekend, and that's the thing.
They've got
me.
It's just, I can't stop.
I'm a consumer. I've got the obligation to go see it, and ultimately, if these films are good, bad, it's part of a balanced diet that I've got. You can maybe, as you say, see a Doctor Strange on a Tuesday, and then you go seeing Everything Everywhere all at once on the Wednesday, and that's fine. These films aren't my be all of the year, and if it drops 70% the following week from its opening weekend box office, couldn't care. I don't get that mentality and that type of fandom. So this film is just one of many films that I will see this year. Many better, many worse, but I will be there for all the future sequels, and I will no doubt chat about them with you too.
It's like, oh no, the film's dropped 68%. It's still made over $600 million in 2 weeks. I mean, jeez.
It's not my money that's losing it or anything like that. It's just it's people that get invested.
It's not even losing money. It's just like, it's not. It's making loads of money. It's still making enough for them to make more of them. It's just like, calm down. It's like, so I mean, essentially what we're saying is that if you go see one multiverse movie this weekend, make it Everything Everywhere All at Once. If you see 2 multiverse movies this weekend, go see Everything Everywhere All at Once twice, because it is dropping in many more theaters. Cineworld are picking up this weekend, so you should be able to get it in more sites, so you'll be able to see that. As for us in the future, we're talking about we've been speaking about multiple Marvel sequels. Now it's time to talk about a sequel that nobody ever really wanted. 35 years on, that turns out to be a masterpiece. We're not talking about Blade Runner 2049. We're apparently going to be talking about Top Gun Maverick. Will it live up to the hype? Does Lady Gaga's song mean we're ushering back an era of the mid to late 90s where, summer blockbusters would have an absolute banger getting to number 1 on the charts? I guess we'll find out soon. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.
Welcome to Nerd